Thank you very much. That was music by Franz Liszt. That was called St. Francis of Assisi Preaching to the Birds. It's sort of equal parts impressionistic bird song in the garden and partly that kind of very fervent but simple sort of preaching melody in the tenor register there. An interesting piece. It's been very challenging. You know, one of the things that helped me when I was learning that piece this last month or so is remembering another program I did that was built around a sort of a religious concert series at the same church, actually up in Oregon. And I, for that series, several years ago, I played an entire program of music by the French composer Olivier Messiaen. And Messiaen, as you may know, you know, one of his big things as a musician and as a composer was that he was very deeply Catholic, and a lot of his music is representative of these very mystical, almost psychedelic sort of Catholic visions and scenes and depictions of various parts of either biblical scenes or other sort of teachings from, you know, saints and prophets and so on. So I thought I would play a little bit of Messiaen's music for you now, just as a little study of comparing and contrasting, because I think in a lot of ways Messiaen is a kind of a successor to Liszt, at least in this sense. You know, I talked about Liszt, the great romantic virtuoso, and, you know, that side of Liszt's music and personality sort of went on and became things like Rachmaninoff and Mahler and Strauss and that kind of over-the-top romantic virtuosity and sort of celebration of the passionate romantic soul. But the other side of Liszt, the virtuoso and sort of religious creator of meditations, you know, that I think the composer that followed him in that regard, I think, would be Olivier Messiaen. Messiaen's musical language is much more modern. You will hear that immediately. But this piece is also a meditation of sorts. This one is called The First Communion of the Virgin and refers to that scene where Mary, the Virgin Mary, learns that she is pregnant with the child of God. And she learns this because an angel appears to her, an actual angel, Gabriel, you know, not the sweet cherubic, you know, angels. This is the Archangel Gabriel. Big, awesome, great big deal. So that's a lot to take in, you know, poor girl, I guess. You know, I mean, overwhelming experience, right? But this scene is kind of the aftermath of that experience that Mary has. And this is called the First Communion of the Virgin. A communion is where she kind of accepts that Jesus is a part of her life. You know, Jesus is a part of her life in a very physical way and spiritual way. In this, you will hear Messiaen's theme of God, which is a 4-chord sequence. It sounds like this. That sequence appears all over his music, and it is called the theme of God for Messiaen. Above that, you will hear the kind of resonance of halos and birdsong up here. This kind of that kind of sparkling music, which is at once very literal transcriptions of birdsong, and also very impressionistic kind of atmospheric texture. You know, meant to sort of create the appearance of halos in his music. This piece cycles through that theme of God, those chords that I was telling you about. It goes through a more exuberant part. That is the part in the story where Mary says the Magnificat. The Magnificat is her prayer of acceptance of her situation and prayer of fulfilling, you know, what God has chosen for her. And then at the end of the piece, after this absolutely exuberant section with all of these bell-like chords that are ringing out, sort of chords of praise. I mean, they sound very dissonant, I think, to most of our ears, but remember, in Messiaen's language, this is music of joy, you know, so when you hear a crashing chord, think, yeah, you know, that's the emotion behind it. And then when it subsides, you hear in the bass a very tiny, faint little heartbeat in the middle, and that is sort of the completion of Mary's communion, of her getting around mentally and spiritually around her situation. So this is an incredible piece. This is called The First Communion of the Virgin Mary, and it is by the French composer Olivier Messiaen, and it was written in 1945. Hi, Julie. Thank you very much. That was music by the French composer Olivier Messiaen. That is from a cycle of 20 meditations called 20 Regards of the Infant Jesus. I think to play the whole cycle of 20 takes over 2 hours. I've only dabbled in a handful of them. I've done an hour's worth of it as a recital, and it's a very interesting recital, music of that style. It's not all quite so passive and contemplative as that, but some of Messiaen's music is very active and full of sort of this turbulent energy. But like I said, even when Messiaen is expressing joy and kind of, these very, very positive emotions, it is with this kind of very, very colorful, some would say dissonant style of chord writing. It's kind of fun to play on the piano, I have to admit. But I love that piece as well. That was called the First Communion of the Virgin, or the Première Communion de la Vierge. Okay, our celebration of St. Francis and this kind of this program built around St. Francis. We started with the music of the morning. We started with Edvard Grieg and the birds and butterflies waking up in that opening scene. And then we heard Franz Liszt, the St. Francis preaching to the birds, and then we took a little detour over to Messiaen and heard this vision of Mary contemplating her status, her new upgraded status. And we're going to close our program again with some music of the night. This is a nocturne. This is a nocturne by the Italian composer Ottorino Respighi. Respighi lived in the late Romantic era, but this is a piece from 1906, so he was well into the sort of modern sounds of the 20th century when he wrote this. When I first learned this piece, it was for a recital series here in San Francisco, a recital series at the Italian Cultural Institute, which has an old historic brick building in North Beach, and it's a beautiful venue, and we did a whole program of Italian music, me and other musicians, and I played this little nocturne, this little Notturno by Respighi, and after the concert, a little Italian woman came up to me, and she said, "That Respighi, I tell you, that's what Debussy would have sounded like if he had been born in Italy." And yes, I mean, see what you think. It certainly captures that sort of hazy, wonderful, colorful, impressionistic sense that Debussy would have enjoyed, but it also has a very strong melodic component, the way Italians like their opera and their pasta with a good, strong melody. So I hope you enjoy this little closing to our program today, a little bit of night music. This is a Notturno by the Italian composer Ottorino Respighi. Ah, thank you very much. That was music by Ottorino, Respighi. And that was, in a nutshell, that was my program celebrating St. Francis that I'm preparing for a little tour next week. I'm taking it up to Oregon. And then when I come back to San Francisco in early October, I'm going to play this program at the Mission Dolores Basilica, which is the big old Spanish mission which San Francisco was founded as. And that's going to be nice, you know, a little program honoring St. Francis, the patron saint of, among other things, San Francisco. Hey. So I'm glad that you all got a sneak preview of that. I'm sure some of you have questions or reactions. I mean, this music was a little out there. You know, the meditations by Liszt and by Messiaen, those are not the sort of standard classical fare you might have expected to hear when you're tuning in. So if you have any questions or any comments, I would love to hear them. I have a few minutes left on this little Zoom program. I see Kate is commenting about St. Francis, and she points out that it is the eve of Michaelmas, St. Michael's Day, of course. That was a big part of my childhood growing up. I went to St. Michael's Academy, and I was in the Michaelmas pageant for many years. Gosh, what was my role in that? Does anyone remember? So yeah, does anyone have any questions? Any feedback? Any ideas for me? Anything strike you as interesting or not interesting or strange? I would love to hear from you. Oh, I see Lori's with us. Hi, Lori. Nice that you could join us. Lori's from Weaverville. I see Kathy and Randall are from Ashland, Oregon. Yes, they loved the calming music. Yeah, I think it is calming. You know, it's nice to have a program that it. Like I said earlier, I think there's music that really the performer is going out to the audience and sort of showing themselves, you know, dun 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 dun, right? And then there's music that invites the audience in to a kind of a more internal bubble or something. So in a way that is, I think, calming. Hopefully calming for everyone involved, including me. Although some of it's very hard.
Did you have all of this that you want?
Yeah.
Yeah? Is that David and
Well, it's Barbara, and we're actually having a little snack while we're watching your music, and she was asking about the snack, but we love the music, so thank you so much, as always.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and I'm so glad you could tune in today. This is I really actually enjoy these programs.
Yeah.
They're not just a
When are
way
you going to come and see us again at Piedmont Gardens?
You know what? I'll be in Piedmont Gardens on Tuesday.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
right. I saw that.
I'll be there
Yeah.
on Tuesday with my colleague Peter Maszek. He's a great Czech violinist, and we're doing Dvorak, and it's going to be a great fun.
Wonderful.
We'll be there.
I see my friend Guy says, you admire Messiaen. That's, you know what? His music is challenging to play, and sometimes it's challenging to listen to as well. You kind of need to spend a little time with it, and I think part of spending time with Messiaen's music is kind of almost like reading the program notes. It's like he wrote a lot about every piece of music he wrote. He wrote what the scene was depicting and what the chords are. Also, Messiaen had a condition in his brain where his sensory inputs crossed, so they call it synesthesia. And in the case of Messiaen, when he heard music, he had very strong color associations with music and with different chords and with different sounds of different instruments. He associated it all with colors, and so if you read his writing about his own music, you can see that it's almost like he's painting with the tones and with the chords. And boy, it's like I wish there was a computer program or something that could show us what was happening in his brain while we heard that music, you know. So yeah, well, thank you all for being a part of this. I recorded it, so I'm going to listen to it on the drive as I'm driving up to Oregon this week, because I have to play that Liszt and that Messiaen. I have to play that several more times. And like I said, it's challenging. There's a lot that goes through my own brain as I'm playing that, you know, stuff like that. Anything else? Any other questions? Anyone want to say hello or anything like that? I see Stephen Fine in Gainesville. Actually, I see James Jaffe in Gainesville, Florida. Wow. What a surprise.
Hey, sounds great, Ian.
I'm glad
Fun show.
I'm glad that I did the early start time this time, and that I have so many Eastern time zone friends coming. Happy New Year to all my my Jewish celebrating friends as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
And to you.
Well, good night, everyone. Have a lovely rest of your weekend, however many hours are left in it, and I'll see you next time.